What is going on, everybody? Intern Joe here, Gamecock Central. Mike Uva will be joining me shortly. Happy National Signing Day, everybody. Big day, big day for the Gamecocks. Good way to start off the national signing or the signing day period with the 2023 class. Had a lot of commitments make it officially official today in the 2023 class. And we have one more big one on Friday in Lenorris Sellers. Get to that once we get Mike on here. We got plenty to talk about. It's National Signing Day. Plenty of recruits, NIL, all of it. We will get to that. We will get to all of your questions as well once Mike gets back on here. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess kind of to recap today, man, I mean, what a day, what a day. Gamecocks landed a bunch of recruits, including 3 of the top 4 recruits in the state of South Carolina, that being Xavier McLeod, Montague Rames, and Marquis Anderson. Big talents there. And it's great to keep guys in state. I wrote an article, should be coming out soon, about Beamer making sure guys stay in state. He mentioned that was one of the key reasons why the Gamecocks had so much production in the 2010 SEC championship run, was that they kept guys in state. So that was one of the biggest things, and one of the biggest themes that stuck out to me about signing day was keeping a lot of guys home in state. And as we are joined by the co-host, Mike Uva. What's going on, Mike? How we doing?
My eyes, you can just see it. My eyes are just bloodshot right now. Yeah, it's been a crazy 24, 36, 48 hours, however long we've been up here. But yeah, National Signing Day is coming to an end, at least for today. But that doesn't mean the fireworks are going to be over quite yet. We can see how things play out the remainder of the week. And we can get into that a little bit. Some of the guys that are still on the board for South Carolina, possibilities that they could be signing to the Gamecocks later on this week. So we'll get into that. We'll look ahead a little bit at the spring as well. But I really want to dig deep into who USC was able to land today, what that means right now from a ranking for the recruiting class. I know that's something that we get asked a lot. Where does that put USC? So we will throw that out there. I'm going to share this on Twitter right now, the link for the show. But guys, look, any questions you have, let us know. It's been obviously a crazy, I wouldn't even say crazy day. I mean, obviously the day was crazy, but it's been a crazy week. It's been a real crazy week. I mean, Tuesday, Shane Beamer with the number of welcome home commitments left and right. It's absolutely incredible. It really is. And I think it goes to show too, maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I think there were some people that were concerned, right? Players that were entering the transfer portal, which we talked about on Gamecock Central. We said, hey, look, this is the new norm. There's going to be players, good players at that enter the portal. Okay. There's going to be good, talented players that enter the portal. And it's not just going to be your school. Now, we'll have to wait and see how things play out in terms of how South Carolina is able to move on from certain players, right, in those positions. You look at a guy like Lloyd. How are they able to replace him? How do they replace a guy like Jaheim Bell? How do they replace a guy even like Austin Stogner, who's going home, or at least being able to move back to Oklahoma so we can be closer to home, right? So we're not going to know these answers until next year, 2 years from now. Some of these guys, depending on who South Carolina was able to land, whether it be through the transfer portal, whether it be through commitments today. But what I would say, though, to that, Joe, is it just goes to show you. That that's just where we are right now. Slow down. There's been momentum created by Beamer and this staff, not just the last 2 years, but over the last couple of weeks in particular, going back to those 2 wins against Tennessee and Clemson to close out the regular season, to earn 8 wins in the regular season for just the 13th time in program history. So I bring all that up just because, and I'll just get this right out the back. Gamecock Central, our co-worker, Chris Clark, reached out actually to Marshawn, and Marshawn said, no, that rumor is not true. So I'll just throw that out there right now so we don't even have that rumor going in the comment section. But South Carolina is sitting in a very pretty spot right now, Joe. They're sitting in a very pretty spot. It's not even about the future of the program when you talk about what they were able to accomplish this past season. It's just what they've been able to do from a recruiting standpoint in 2 full cycles with Shane Beamer. And I say full, of course, we have to wait and see how things play out in February. We know there's a big piece that still is on the table and in play, and that is Nicholas Harbor. But for the sake of the conversation, where they are at today, you have to be feeling very good about yourselves.
Yeah, Mike, absolutely. Last week, couple weeks ago when the transfer portal opened, it felt like from the fan base, felt like the house was on fire, right? And so now today with signing day, a lot of that momentum is back. There's a lot of good vibes, good energy, Mike. I know you have the positive Gamecock Twitter. There's been a lot of it recently, especially with signing day and the flip of Big Tree. Can't talk about how impactful that is for this class and just for South Carolina in general. He's a big piece in this class. And I mean, like I said, I think it's big for momentum. It turns momentum back around where you see guys like Jaheim Bell and Stogg and Marshawn entering the portal, and you kind of think it's like, oh no, what's happening? Why is this happening after we won those last 2 games? Well, now you're seeing the product of what winning those last 2 games does for you, and having Beamer, and the momentum is starting to carry into recruiting, which is what we're seeing here today, and hopefully in February with obviously the big name at large, Nick Harbor.
So, Joe, I want to take a look at a couple of things here. I want to see if you're able to bring up a couple of them as well. We'll bring up some of these videos that we were able to do over at Gamecock Central. If you hadn't checked them out already, head on over to GC. We have videos, capsules, little short videos. So if you remember going back to May, we started doing these breakdown videos, explaining who these players are, kind of giving you an idea with the number of stars they have, what they were able to accomplish in high school, just to give you a feel for these players. But I know a lot of months have passed since some of these players verbally committed, and now that they signed today, maybe you need a nice refresher. We made some of these videos, and they're very condensed. They're very tight. They're about a minute long. And then some of these newer players that maybe you hadn't heard too much about, or maybe you just don't know that much about, and you want to learn more about them since they are future Gamecocks. They are Gamecocks now, I should say, since they put pen to paper. So I bring that up because you can head on over to the Gamecock YouTube page, Gamecock Central YouTube page. Check that out. You can head on over to Gamecock Central. If you haven't already, too, if you're not a member, subscribe today. Subscribe today, subscribe tomorrow. $10. If you subscribe today, take advantage of the offer that we have right now at Gamecock Central. You will be able to pay $10 and get all the Gamecock Central content you want leading up to September of 2023. Think about that. It's not a bad deal. Not a bad deal at all. All right, Joe, I'm going to pull up the list here. Okay. I'm going to pull up the list, and we're going to go down and we're going to talk about some of these players that South Carolina has been able to land. Certainly being able to land Tree was a big one today. Even going back to yesterday, being able to get him to flip. I wouldn't say flip, to recommit to USC after committing back in August. And then he decommitted last week, and then he came back. But, talking to players, talking to recruits, they stayed heavily in the mix with reaching out to him. And there were times where he kind of went silent on some of them for a little bit last week, but he came back. And ultimately South Carolina was able to land him. So I'm going to go here to the team rankings, and you can check this out over on Gamecock Central. Go right to On 3. It brings you right to it. Right now, South Carolina, their team ranking, which is an industry comparison, brings all the, On 3, 24/7, ESPN rivals. It brings everything together. It's the consensus. We're the only ones that does this. South Carolina is 17th right now. 17th. Someone asked me early this morning, Joe, it feels like it was yesterday. Someone asked me, where do I think South Carolina can ultimately land? And I think, look, let's take Nicholas Harbor out of the equation, because certainly that will skyrocket USC. We know that. I still think USC can land in that 16, 15 range. There's obviously some key pieces still in play this week. that South Carolina can land, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I want to talk about the players that have already signed, but I think that's where I'm looking at with USC right now, because you look at the teams that are ahead of them. Look at the teams that are ahead of them. There's still a possibility to move on up, and I do think they will. I do think they will. Again, this is the industry comparison. So, I mean, you'll look at rivals 24/7. Some of them will tell you a little bit higher. Some might have them a little bit lower. This is using all the databases and putting them together and being able to get one number. So that's where you get that number. Where do you think USC might land, Joe?
I mean, personally, like looking at it, like you said, I think they're, possibly, I mean, obviously if they get Nick Harbor, they're going to jump up a bunch of spots, but looking at it, I mean, Auburn, Texas A&M, and Penn State are the immediate three that are above them. I think if they keep landing some of these 4-stars and get pen to paper with a lot of them, I think it'll keep rising up past those three. So I could see them as high as 13 or as 14, but also too, you've got USC, Tennessee, Clemson. That's kind of where you start getting in the blue bloods. Florida's super high up there, and I mean, I can see Florida dropping down when it comes to February. I know their fan base was certainly disappointed with signing day and how everything's gone so far. So I can certainly see Florida dropping down a little bit. And then Clemson too. They had a decent day today from what I've seen. Hate to see that, but yeah, I mean, I could see him as high as 14, but then with the Florida maybe 13. That's really, like I said, that's really when you start to get into some of the blue bloods. So definitely cracking into the top 15 is a big step for Beamer in his third year, and only continues to build the momentum on the recruiting trail for sure.
Again, I want to go through some of the list of players that USC was able to land today. I want to pull up some of these comments though. Kevin mentions, Big Tree. It was big, being able to get Tree back in the fold, and I think the thing with Tree more than anything, I think obviously the connection to Maryland, right? And Maryland obviously has the connection with Under Armour. And I think it really, I don't know if scared's the right word, Joe, but I think it upset a lot of people. Yeah. What I've said before, and I know there's going to be some people that aren't going to like when I say this, that's just the way it is. It is. You can try to look at it and be like, oh, it's tampering. It's this. No, what they're doing is they're using their resources to their advantage. Now, obviously, there is a line. There is a line where they're able, you got to make sure you don't cross it. But they're not, a lot of these places, they're not that dumb. They're not that dumb. They're not going to go out in public, right, at a basketball game, wherever the case may be out amongst other people, knowing that people can put 2 and 2 together if you do something that's stupid, right? So I bring that up just because there's just so much gray area with some of this NIL stuff. You're going to see schools use their resources like they have to their advantage. And even though a school like Maryland, from a football standpoint, okay, yeah, they're an ACC school. They struggle from an attendance standpoint. We know all that. But that doesn't mean they can't, persuade a player or two to come on over if they, essentially give them the bag. And it is frustrating. It is. But I think being able to see how this played out, I think the other parts of it too are, just because a player decommits, don't instantly just assume, okay, they're going after the money. There could be family things going on too, right? They might want to be closer to home because of a family member sick, or they just want to be closer to home for whatever reason, right? So I bring those things up because as this played out, and we've seen it before, not just with the Gamecock fans, we've seen this with other fan bases. You get all worked up. When I say all, I'm not saying this whole fan base. You have a couple, ham bones out there, and they'll send DMs, they'll send tweets out there publicly, and it's all over social media, right? I'm not saying that Tree didn't get a tweet or two that probably was probably like a kick below the belt, but I bring all that up because fortunately that wasn't something that came back and haunted USC. So my whole point being, Joe, is let these things kind of play out. If you get all pissed off that a player's going over, they're chasing the bag. Really? Tree came on back. Everything's good. Slow down. Slow down.
Yeah, Mike, I think you're hitting on it well there. I think, when guys decommit, it just means they're exploring their other options, seeing what other schools will do for them. And to the point of the Under Armour thing, Phil Knight's been doing that at Oregon for years now.
Years. Back
Yeah,
door.
for years. Exactly. And before it was legal, too. Before it was legal. So, I mean, it's been a big thing for a while. And I think, like touching on the topic of Big Tree, like, yeah, there were definitely a couple kicks below the belt, if you will. But ultimately, Tree came back, and that's exactly what fans want. That's exactly what they wanted to see. And so it just takes time, right? Obviously, the positivity helps them and helps them, want to come back a little bit more. So the kicks below the belt are obviously, a lesson to be learned there for people that did. But like, it takes time, and these kids just, it's a hard decision. It's where they want to spend, their next 2-3 years, whatever. I mean, with the transfer portal, you never know, but like, this is their future, at least for now. And so it's a big decision, and guys want to be sure of it.
Speaking about futures, we're not going to get into, is this player the mystery welcome home out there? That's kind of just how we do things over at Gamecock Central. We're not going to steal the thunder. We'll give you kind of heads up when a player could be making an announcement. That doesn't necessarily mean a player will be committing to USC, right? We know, Lenorris is going to be making his commitment later this week. There were rumbles that he was going to sign the paperwork today, but then he was going to, do the whole presentation on Friday. He decided to just do it all on Friday now. Okay. So that's what I would say about some of these comments that may ask, is this person? We're not gonna get into that. What are your thoughts on Lloyd second guessing his decision? I think there's a lot of rumors out there right now. As we reported from our colleague Chris Clark over at Gamecock Central, he reached out directly to Marshawn. He had talked to people that were close to the situation, but then eventually he just talked directly to him. And Marshawn, as he put it, and it's on Gamecock Central on the Insider Forum, he has not had any second thoughts about coming back to South Carolina. That was a rumor that got put out there, and that is all it is. I do think, though, I'm interested to see how things play out for Marshawn. There are some things that have transpired since he left that I think he is learning. Maybe wasn't going to go exactly the way he planned it to happen. But we're going to have to wait and see how things play out, because in a situation like this, things are so fluid, right? I say one thing right now, then 2 days later, I look like an idiot if you say it. So you just got to wait and see how some of these things play out. But what I mean by that, I'll kind of hint at it, is, he's testing the waters. And it's not even necessarily from just an NIL standpoint. We know NILs, it plays a role, right? But certainly Marshawn wants to be the number one back. We know that if he stayed at South Carolina, that, the way he played last season, if he's healthy, he would have been the number one back here. So I'm going to wish nothing but the best for Marshawn. He was always first class to deal with. And we'll see. We'll see where he ends up eventually as intern Joe steps out for a quick minute. Kenny, who is going to teach the defense to make tackles after the first hit? I don't even know what the hell you're talking about, Kenny. Who's going to teach the defense to make tackles after the first hit? I think Clayton White's been doing all right with the defense. Took a maybe step back in certain areas this year in comparison to where they were last year. But I think all in all, and considered where they were a couple of years ago, I think the defense has improved. Kevin, Sellers did not sign today, and we'll do both on Friday. Yep, so that's what we were talking about. I think that is great news for us. Yeah, look, I will say this. The possibility of Sellers ending up at South Carolina, it's growing. It's growing. South Carolina is certainly in the mix. They certainly will have a chance. And I'm not just saying that for the sake of saying like, oh, well, we know that, one of the hats might be South Carolina. No, I'm saying like they have a legitimate shot. They have a legitimate shot. And it's just a testament to what this coaching staff has done from a recruiting standpoint to be able to stay in the mix with that. Yep, talking about the Marshawn Lloyd rumor that we put to bed. Yep, that was fake news. Fake news. Signing day cured my depression. Well, we always like to see that. Always like to see that. We always like to see happy, happy, happy. Great day for South Carolina and South Carolina Gamecocks. No question about it. And Lee, going back to Sellers, is he coming? What's y'all's opinion? I think South Carolina is certainly in the mix, and they have a very good chance to be able to land him. I think it just speaks volumes for what this coaching staff has been able to do from a recruiting standpoint and being able to sell the program to a point where, I mean, you look at the quarterback situation that USC could be in next year, right? I mean, if Spencer Rattler comes back, obviously that makes your room better. I mean, that goes without saying. But you look at some of the guys they have, I mean, this could be one of their more talented QB rooms that they've had in a long time. And that's speaking in the sense of saying that, Sellers is there. You still have Dante Reno, who is still in the class of 2024, who always could reclassify. I just want to throw that out there. He always could. And I think we'll have to pay attention to see how things kind of play out over these next couple of weeks. Like if a guy like Spencer Rattler, if he goes to the draft, right, that could open up a possibility for him to want to enroll early. If a guy like Sellers commits to South Carolina, does that change the thought process up a little bit for Reno? When I say that, I don't necessarily, I'm not saying like he's going to decommit. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in terms of speeding up the process. Does he want to get on campus quicker because of that? So those are some of the things. I know USC is trying to get a quarterback to come in next year in some shape, way, or form. I know, Joe, were you at the press conference today?
I was not, but I was following it on YouTube.
And Beamer brought up that he wants to be able to bring a quarterback in. He wants a quarterback in this class. And I think that's, look, again, if Rattler's back next season, we know Rattler's going to be the starting QB. It goes without saying. But even if Rattler is back, being able to create competition, being able to have some of these younger guys compete, I know Luke Doty will be in the mix. I certainly believe that if Rattler is gone next season, unless they go to the transfer portal, which, again, these situations are always fluid, but about a month ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I was told that they weren't anticipating going into the portal to bring a quarterback in. Unless there was a kid that is just, the can't-miss kid. They were not going to go to the portal for a quarterback. So you think just playing this game out, Rattler leaves, just for sake of the conversation. I'm not saying he is, but for sake of the conversation, he leaves. And you don't get Sellers. Now what? Well, you always have the possibility that Reno could reclassify up to 2023. You have Luke Doty there, right? Brandon Davis, you can go down the list. So I think it would bring more question marks about next season if Rattler doesn't come, if a guy like Sellers doesn't come, like more so with Rattler than anything else, because now you don't have a proven starter. Doty, of course, has experience as a starter, but I mean, look, he was freshman year thrown out there. That was a skeleton of a team at that point when he was thrown into the mix, that 2-8 season during the COVID year. And then, of course, he had the injury last year. So we haven't really even seen what Doty could be, in my opinion, Joe. So, again, if we do get to that point, I hope Doty is able to go out there and ball out, because it sounds like, depending on how some of these other things play out, that USC will give him that opportunity to earn that starting role.
Yeah, Mike, absolutely. And I mean, if you touched on it earlier when you said like this could be one of the most talented QB rooms that South Carolina's had. I mean, you look at it, like you have Spencer, you have Tanner Bailey, you've got Luke Doty, and then you have Braden Davis. And if Sellers possibly comes in, I mean, that's a really, really talented room. And I mean, you would think Colton Gothy, I don't want to start any rumors, but I mean, that's a lot of quarterbacks in the room, and Colton Gauthier would be the odd man out, but you never know. But I mean, there is a lot of quarterback talent, even regardless if Spencer stays or not. Like, obviously, you would like him to, but even if he doesn't, you still have Luke Doty, who the program from inside the building, all I have heard is positive things. Like, everybody loves Luke Doty, and that he's been able to, kind of progress as a player, had time to really learn the offense and be in the building and just, develop. And that's something we didn't see as a freshman, because you're right, he was kind of thrown in the fire with a skeleton of a team. You couldn't be any more right on that. Like, I mean, that team had quit and all that stuff, and like, he was banged up, hurt, a lot of different things for Doty. So I think this would be the time that we would see the full-fledged Luke Doty, all healthy and all. So, I think it would be really interesting. I think there's still a lot of talent, even if Spencer leaves, because I've heard a lot of good things about Tanner Bailey as well. Yep. And then you got Braden Davis too, who's going to develop into something big. And then obviously with Lenorris coming in, it's a stacked quarterback room, quite possibly. And then if Spencer comes back, obviously it's primary.
And real quick, Tay, good catch. I'm on no sleep. I'm on no sleep right now, as you can probably tell from my bloodshot eyes. So I'm still living in the early 2000s of Maryland being in the ACC. Yes, they are in the Big Ten. But, I mean, shoot, even in the Big Ten, and I think it goes back to one of the questions someone asked today about what I thought about Beamer's press conference. Look, there's certainly something going on with Maryland. I know the Under Armour thing, it's easy, but there's certainly something going on with, how can I put this? There's something going on from a recruiting standpoint. And I'm not saying necessarily NIL, but I'm saying dirty recruiting. Because Beamer wouldn't go out of his way to make a comment like that. Right? And obviously there's some history going back to last season, how things played out with Barham flipping his commitment to Maryland at the last minute. But we're seeing other teams, like you mentioned, Lane Kiffin, tweeting out some thoughts with Maryland, with his subliminally, right? Like just doing retweets, liking stuff, and he was doing that, of course, with Texas A&M too. Something has to be going on there. Something has to be going on. I don't know what the specifics are. We've heard things going back to last season, but not to a point where it's in cement that you could run with it for a report. It's one of those things that you say it's he said, she said, you're getting in one of those pissing contests. But I think there's something going on in the college football world where other because Joe, you know this. Coaches know what the hell's going on. Coaches know. These coaches, think about every time, especially in the SEC, but it could be anywhere, but especially in the SEC or even a Power 5, how when they play a different school, even go back to the Muschamp era, right? It's like, well, I've known so-and-so for a long time. I got some every freaking week. Every week there's always something like that. You don't think amongst the coaches they talk about something funky that could be going on up there, or something going on to the point where it's rubbing some of these coaches the wrong way. And I'm usually not one to sit here and be like, oh, you're crying about it. Stop crying. I don't think that's the case right here. Not when you're having multiple coaches. And even though Maryland's not TikTok tech, okay, yes, their football program hasn't been fantastic in recent years. Yes, their attendance has been atrocious in recent years, but it's still a Power 5 school. It still has history as a university. I bring that up, though, because some of these schools, it's like, makes you wonder, why are we losing this recruiting battle? Why are we losing, and for USC, shoot. And I'm not saying everyone's going to fall in love with going to USC. I think some Gamecock fans, they hear that, they're like, oh my God, who couldn't fall in love with Columbia? The city of dreams, Joe. I think that needs to be pushed to the side. But when you have the NIL opportunities that are out there, I think that's going to naturally be something that people are going to start to think about. It's going to be in the back of their head, and they're going to be saying, I wonder if there's any correlation there. I wonder if there's a reason why little Johnny, who's getting recruited by 3, 4, 5 SEC schools, pretty good ones too, right? Whether it be from a historical standpoint with the wins and losses, or the atmosphere with the fan base, whatever the case may be, and they go to Maryland or they go to one of these other schools, right? Local kids, okay, it's easier to kind of like, how are you going to argue that? But you get someone from the other side of the freaking country coming on over, hey, let's go to Maryland for football. What? Come on.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, literally, I've also heard the things about Maryland, and so it's an interesting thing, right? Because you're right. And if a lot of coaches are talking about it in that light, it's obvious there's obviously something going on. I'm not sure what. I'm not in touch with the Maryland program, but when there's that many coaches on the national scale talking about this one school in particular, there's something going on. And I have also heard their coach has had some issues at his previous stops at Alabama that have had brought up some complaints as well. And two, but like, I'm also not going to sit here and act like, nobody else does it. Nobody else reaches out to recruits or guys that are, soon to be in the portal or going to go after some guys. Like, I feel like everyone across the country does it. Why we're talking about this in Maryland is because Maryland goes above and beyond and does, worse stuff than all the other programs in the country. But I mean, firmly, like, I think everyone does it, but Maryland's a lot worse than everybody. And you can tell because everyone else, all of the coaches around the country are seemingly pointing to one guy, one program. And also to Maryland, it's like they get more people out at their lacrosse games than their football games. So if they are drawing in some recruits like that, obviously there's something going on. And I mean, I have no idea as to what exactly, and I don't want to start any rumors based off of my knowledge of nothing in terms of Maryland, but like, I just there's something going on there, Mike, and you really don't know.
Trying to go through some of these questions here. We got some good ones right here, so we'll kind of speed through them real quick. First one, talking about the bowl game. I do want to get into the guys who signed today. So I know we kind of got off track a little bit, but just talking about some of the things that go hand in hand now when you're talking about commitments and signing day and all that fun stuff, right? But Happy says, is there any chance that Josh Van makes it back for the bowl game? I mean, there's always a chance. There's always a chance. I would say right now, I think Beamer put it out there actually last night. I think he said he's doubtful. He's a long shot, one of those two. I'm paraphrasing, but I think with Josh, I mean, you gotta ask yourself, what is it worth? Is it worth it? He obviously has, a daughter. He's trying to play at the next level. Is it worth trying to push yourself through and speed that process up by playing in one more game and putting yourself in a position where you could make it even worse, right? Because as soon as that bowl game's done, what is he going to do? He's going to start training. He's going to get ready for pro day. So again, I know fans don't always like hearing it, but sometimes you got to be selfish. Sometimes you got to put yourself first. And I would not blame Van if he did that, if that is the case. I know this was someone that people were hoping to see sign today. Any news on 4-star Zavion Hardy? Notice he didn't sign today. I know there's going to be some guys. There's going to be some guys that aren't going to sign until a little bit later. I'm trying to pull up my list here because I know that some guys are, some guys aren't. I didn't have him as a late signee. Let's pull it up. But
I also on that. I did notice he didn't sign today. I was going to bring that up.
Trying to pull up the comments because Chris and Wes are the best. when it comes to this stuff, when it comes to the recruiting trails. So I'm trying to pull up what they actually wrote about it because it'd be better to hear it from them. Tell you exactly what they said. I'm going to work on that. I'm going to work on that to be able to get that pulled up for you so we can tell you exactly what Chris and Wes had to say. But I think the thing is with the early signing day period, and again, I don't know the specifics with Hardy, but I'm talking in general. A lot of players do want to just get it out of the way. They want to sign early. I mean, obviously, there's some guys that will enroll early, and that has more so to do with making sure you got to get all your credits done, being able to enroll, finish up high school on time, all that kind of stuff. But that aside, there are some guys that do enjoy waiting until that second signing day period, which of course was the only signing day period for a long time. So he has a couple days. He has a couple days. I think we're gonna we talk about Lenorris. He's gonna be making a decision over the next couple days, right? So we'll see how things play out with Hardy. I mean, shoot, Joe, I don't know if you remember. I don't know what grade you were in. I remember covering this thing, but I think some people have PTSD of the Jordan Burch situation. And I'm Jordan family. I'm not, trying to bring back the headaches that you guys had to deal with because I know Gamecock fans, they were very, what's the word, impatient, a lot of them, because that's a big time commitment right there. Right? It's a big time guy. And for Hardy not to sign today, I think there are some people that, puts them on edge a little bit, puts them on edge. I mean, you look at the caliber of player that Hardy is, 4-star from Macon, Georgia. He is the 24th rated defensive lineman in the nation for the class of 2023. Hard commit going all the way back to August, but we really haven't heard too much from him, it feels like, in comparison to some of these other prospects, right? So I bring that up, Joe, because maybe there's a group of people out there that, and I'm using the most extreme, right? If it was like a Pup Howard, it's like, oh, well, that's just, he's just doing his own thing. We know how he feels about the university. Maybe it would make people feel a little bit better, but that's not the case right now. So I would just see how things play out over the next couple of days. I brought up the Jordan Burch situation. For those of you that don't know, Burch didn't sign that day. I think it took maybe a couple of days, and then he signed. Can't remember if he waited. I mean, shoot. I just bring that up just because I remember that whole situation. I remember being in the barbershop, sitting in my chair, getting a haircut, and my phone up, and he didn't sign. And there were tweets going on saying, I think it was actually SC Sports Talk that put it out there that he had signed, but it never happened. I think everyone just assumed he was going to sign, but he didn't. And then it took a couple days. So that's probably a little bit about it, Joe, right? I mean, just people just want to see, okay, hey, you're committed to South Carolina, just sign. We just want to make sure, okay, you signed, good to go.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, I'm seeing the comments. Thank you guys. Appreciate you guys commenting, but it looks like it's an NCAA clearinghouse issue, something like that. Must have got sent late or something like that. So obviously, like, I would assume that's what I was thinking. I mean, I figured it was something with transcript wise, something got set in late. But because from everything I've heard, Zavion Hardy is committed entirely. So he's a big recruit.
Hey, look, this is what happens when you're on no freaking sleep and you're
no worries.
You're covering the Patriots today.
Hardy's going to be a big deal when he gets here too. He's a big recruit for
us. Let's go down. Let's go through the list though. Let's go through the list. Shout out to Jessica Jackson, everyone over there who does an outstanding job. I've had my thoughts on Under Armour. We'll talk about that in a little bit, Ryan. I think we talked about it last week a little bit, but I'll share my thoughts on that. Intern Joe, you get your Bojangles dinner. I told Mike he's got to eat. Some of those gift cards, we sent out about like 60 or, about 60, 70 of them the other day. I think a lot of them are people are starting to get there. So if you had a gift card sent to you and you were expecting one, go check for it because they expire at the end of the year. And then we'll get some new ones, hopefully from Bojangles that won't expire until the end of 2023. Yeah, let's go look at the list. Okay. We're going to hop around a little bit here, Joe. Okay. I don't want to be super long because I got to get home, man. I'm about an hour away from home. I'm ready to sleep. I've been up for about 36 hours straight. So let's go down the list though. Okay. Marquis Anderson, being able to land a guy like Marquis, right? We heard so much about the trenches and what they wanted to do, not just on the offensive side of the ball, but the defensive side of the ball. And being able to land a guy with his size, 6'3", about 6'4", 300 pounds. He's a local guy. I've had numerous conversations with Marcus Lattimore, who, of course, is from Duncan, played at Burns. That area is considered Clemson country, right? Just like when you think about Columbia, right? And some of the suburbs around, like, Lexington, that's Gamecock country. So to be able to go up there, especially considering the fact that, yeah, Clemson might be, teeter-tottering a little bit in comparison to where they were the last couple of years, but I'd still say they're one of the more, recognizable names in college football still from a recruiting standpoint, whether we want to acknowledge that or not or admit it. I think it speaks volumes that South Carolina was able to go out there. Just something that really stood out to me about him, though, right? Number 2 prospect in the state. He is the highest signee to date in the Shane Beamer era, 6'4", 300 pounds. He was also a 5A state runner-up in the shot put as a junior. Very athletic, chose the Gamecocks over a long list of Power 5 schools, North Carolina, LSU, Kentucky, and also Clemson. Big get for the Gamecocks. He'll be playing in the Under Armour All-American game on January 3rd, Joe. And then be moving in actually on January 4th, which, as Shane Beamer said today, I think over a dozen of the players who signed today, they're going to be enrolling early. I believe that's what he said today during his press conference.
Yeah, I think so. It was close to a dozen. And I think Marquis Anderson's a big recruit, literally. Big kid. And it's something that South Carolina had a very veteran offensive line this year. A lot of guys had logged a lot of snaps. So to rebuild this foundation, starting with Marquis, it's a very big step in the right direction. And you're going to look to build this next generation of the offensive line around him, right? I mean, such a big piece, homegrown talent. Good commit, good land.
Yep. Let's keep going down the list. We have Desmond Umeozulu. This one came out a little bit later, right? I mean, this morning, if you were up early around that 7:20, 7:40 time, I mean, they were coming out quick. They were coming out fast. I was still up banging out some of these videos that we have, some of these signing day videos, and I see Wes woke up maybe around like 6:30, 6:40 or whatever. He's ready to go. And within 30 minutes, bang, 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 bang. Well, Umeozulu, he wasn't part of that group. He was in the afternoon. But once he signed, big get for South Carolina, 6'6", 240 pounds. Something that's really stood out to me when I watch his tape is that he uses his length and power so well for a high schooler. With a wingspan measuring of 6'8", he does a tremendous job of not letting other guys hold him up the line of scrimmage. 3rd highest recruit from the state of Maryland. Again, that is an important get, a very important get. We talk about Nicholas Harbor. We talk about South Carolina still having the opportunity to be able to pick him up, to be able to go up there and try to do something that they really haven't done that well, I'd say, from a historical standpoint. Yeah, they've had a couple of players, but the way that Beamer's attacking that DMV area right now, right? I know we're going to talk about some of these other players in a second, but, you got Alua Tosin Babalade, you got Zabari Sandy, you get some of these other guys up there, right? in that DMV area, that's huge. That's a big, big get to be able to get another person from the DMV, especially when you talk about being in the running still to be able to get Nicholas Harbor.
Yeah, Mike, I agree. I mean, that's one thing I saw in his film is that he uses his length a lot. Reminds me a lot of another kid in this class, Montague Rames, who's another big name that we'll get to. But those two guys have insane length, and obviously, like you brought it up too, big get from the DMV. And so, I mean, yeah, big defensive end that could cause a lot of problems.
Moving along, Joseph.
Oh,
Grayson Howard.
our guy.
I think he might be the most beloved Gamecock that has never played, right up there with Dante Reno. You know, something that just goes to show how he got better this season. I mean, he this past season, Joe, he had 188 tackles. 188 tackles, 18 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. Finished his high school career with over 500 tackles. Absolutely outstanding. 17 sacks. He's been someone that has been huge from a recruiting standpoint. One thing that we have noticed, though, and he told 107.5 The Game, I think maybe about a week and a half ago, he's participating in practices with USC and Columbia prior to returning to Jacksonville for Christmas break. Now, the NCAA rules, they permit incoming players to participate in on-campus practices, not at the bowl site. So he can't go down to Jacksonville, even though he's from that area, as long as the high school coursework is completed and admissions has been granted to the collegiate institution. So there was a picture today. You saw Pup out there. I always think we talk about these bowl practices. We talk about young players. This is something that we see, you know, occasionally in South Carolina, but I feel like we see this at other schools, you know, like Alabama, Georgia, like, you know, so to be able to have this, I think it's big. And again, I'm not saying it's never happened at South Carolina. I just feel like we don't see it happen as much compared to some of these other schools.
Yeah, Mike. I think, Pup being here is a big step in his development. That's something he wanted to do from the jump. Big recruiter. He's one of the first guys in this class that really bought in and really started to, recruit other guys. And you could tell from the jump, he wanted to be here. He really, really wanted to be here. Friend of the program, too. He's been on our show. Lovely kid. Awesome dude. And I'm excited for him to get started.
We'll kind of pop in some questions here and there and kind of just, use it as we go down the list. Brian says, who do you think is the most underrated signee for Carolina today? Well, I don't know if this would be considered underrated, because I think he's going to be very talented and he's a 4-star running back. But Dontavius Braswell, I think he can be very, very special at South Carolina. He is speed demon, 5'11", 200 pounds, pure muscle. He is a state champion in the 100 and 200 meter dash. He is someone that I think can make an impact, especially when you look at the fact that, okay, you lost Marshawn Lloyd, right? You're losing Dante Turbo Miller. You're losing Christian Beal-Smith. When you look at just the makeup of that room, that's not to say Lavassier Carroll can't step in and do good things. That's not to say a guy like Juju McDowell can't do good things. But looking at the body type and look what Dontavius is able to do, I think he could go in there. And I think, it also goes with the guy that I would say is probably I'd probably say is the, how did you word it? The most underrated, Mario Anderson from Newberry. Mario Anderson was a Harlan Hill finalist, which is the equivalent of the Division II Heisman Trophy at Newberry College. Rushed for over 3,300 yards, 35 career touchdowns as a Wolf. We saw what he was able to do. And I say we're talking about Shane Beamer. What Beamer was in this coaching staff was able to do their first season here. They brought in Carlins Patel from a Division II school. Carlins goes out there. Took him a little time to get acclimated, but what happens? He eventually ends up starting at nickel, did a tremendous job for the Gamecocks, and now he's with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I say that because I can think of a couple more situations where you have Division II guys get called up or they, move up. They don't get called up, of course, but they move on up and they do some good things in the SEC in particular. So, again, we talk about that running back room. I think Braswell, he's more of that speed back. He's got some muscle on him. But when you look at Anderson, Joe, my goodness. I mean, he's the type of running back I feel like USC needs. Kind of like that Kevin Harris built, if you will.
Yeah, Mike. And I mean, you were talking. So Anderson's a big piece, obviously, but then Braswell's also kind of built like Marshawn Lloyd and Kevin Harris. 5'11", 200 pounds. I'm sorry. Yeah, Braswell's 200 pounds, but it's the same build. They're both the same build. They're the same archetype, and that's what's worked at South Carolina previously too. To answer that question personally, I think it's going to be Montague Rames or Zavion Hardy, defensive tackle, defensive end. Montague is not 6'5". I think he's like closer to 6'6". You get him in here and put on some pounds. He could be a force up front, quick, fast, agile. He's a problem.
Can I tell you too? I mean, we talk about underrated, a guy that will fly under the radar, but someone that everyone should keep an eye on. I'm going to friggin' the Italian in me is going to get very upset because I've been saying his name right all freaking week. Nick Gargiulo.
Oh, yeah.
Gargiulo. I'm going to go back. I have to make sure I wrote the notes down, but this is
high on him today.
I have everything written down, and of course now I can't freaking say it when I'm live. But I bring that up because what he was able to accomplish at Yale, right? They only vote one team captain. The fact that he was a captain over there, the fact that South Carolina is in desperate need to fill that void at that center position with Eric Douglas graduating. He's going to be someone that's going to come in here. He's going to have an opportunity to be a starter, right, at that center spot in particular. And Gargiulo, excuse me. I don't even want to know what the comment section says. My grandmother, if she was watching, she would slap me. But I bring that up. I think Gargiulo could be a guy that really, really does some good things. He's only going to be here for one season, right? But I think he can do some good things. And another guy too. I mean, I feel like we're just saying like this whole recruiting class is going to be under the radar. Trey Knox. And it's not even necessarily about what he's able to do statistically. I think he will do some good things. The fact that he understands what Dal Loggins and Justin Stepp, what they look for, especially Dal Loggins, right? I think he's going to be able to be a leader out there on the field. I think, Gargiulo is also going to be a good leader out there because I just feel like he's a natural leader. You talk to people, he played for Dante Reno's father over at Yale. I think he's someone that can come in here and make a big impact. So again, this is just looking at some of the guys, Trevon Baugh. I mean, there's some very good offensive linemen. There's going to be some guys that will certainly be able to compete for a starting job. I'm interested to see who's going to rise to the occasion because as talented as this class is at the offensive line position and even defensive line, right? As talented as they are, though, specifically speaking about the offensive line, you're not going to have all those guys out there as starters from day one. Yeah. I mean, I think we all know that. So, when you look at who could be in that mix from day one, or again, use the Carlin Patel comparison, who could be a guy that eventually, a couple games into the season, they're able to get in there and they're able to establish themselves as the starter for whatever that position is in the offensive line. I think continuity is going to be the biggest hurdle that South Carolina is going to have to overcome next season when you're talking about the offense. And we don't even know if Rattler is going to be back next season. So that throws another wrench into the equation. But you think about, okay, you have a new play caller. You don't know exactly what's going to happen at the quarterback position, but let's just say for conversation, Rattler's back. Even if he's back, right, that offensive line, the offensive line that a lot of people for 2 straight years were griping about, And I'm not saying they didn't deserve their shots at times, but that offensive line's gone. You have to fill that now. You have to fill that with some of these guys who, again, they're coming right out of freaking high school. You do have some guys that, whether it be a transfer like, Gargiulo, like we mentioned. But there's going to be guys, though, Joe, that need to rise to the occasion. And I think you will find a player or two that will make that impact right away.
Yeah, Mike, I saw a question earlier that was like, what position group or who exactly would be, cracking into the starting lineup. I think offensive line is one of the positions where we could see a freshman coming up and stepping up and making an impact. I think offensive line is one of those where you need continuity throughout the year. You want to kind of get that figured out throughout the first couple of weeks. And obviously, if a guy goes down, somebody else steps up. But offensive line, once Beamer and Loggins have their guys, they're going to need to keep that consistently if they want to keep momentum rolling next year. And I see another question from Big Red saying, does the offensive line help Spencer's decision? I don't see why not. I think it does play a different role. I think it does play a big role in his protection. So obviously you want protection if you're coming back, and I do think that plays some sway into Spencer's decision for sure. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, Joe. I mean, there's multiple factors. There's multiple factors that are going on right now as far as what Rattler is going to ultimately do with his decision, and you can't blame him. Can't blame him. Let's continue to go through this list because I'm going to get out of here in a little bit. Or maybe we can try to see if we can get this going. I could use my phone on the way back. Let's see. I'll just kind of voice a couple opinions, and Joe, chime in too if you want to say anything. But we'll try to move this. Xavier McLeod, right? Local kid, Mr. Football recipient, Camden High School, 6'5", 325 pounds. When you look at what South Carolina lost on the defensive line with some of their, and I say loss. Obviously, they lost Zach Pickens. They're going to lose some more talent on the D-line next season. Being able to juice that D-line up, which is something we've talked about. You mentioned Rames from Sumter, who played at Manning High School this past season. That is a very talented kid right there, and he's also going to be playing in the Under Armour All-American game on January 3rd.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Xavier McLeod's a big get. Big get. Like you said, Mr. Football wants to stay home and did. Talked about like wanting to stay home within the proximity of South Carolina. I thought that was a big thing for him. And I think it's a big thing what Beamer's trying to do. Talked about it in his presser today, wants to keep guys home. That was a big secret to the success of the SEC championship run. So I think McLeod's huge in that aspect.
We mentioned Braswell, running back from Georgia, 13th overall running back for the class of 2023. Something that should not be overlooked. Braswell is the first. He is the first high school running back to sign since Shane Beamer took over the job. Think about that. So I bring that up because last season, USC, they didn't bring any running backs in out of high school. They went to the portal. That's okay. But I think there's something to be said, though, that you definitely want to be able to bring, especially that position in the SEC, being able to develop guys, and not just develop anybody. This is a talented running back, as we mentioned, 4-star, a speedster, absolute speedster. His junior year rushed for just shy of 1,100 yards. You mentioned Rames. We understand the power that he brings. Trevon Baugh, 6'4", 310 pounds. That is one big boy. On3's director of scouting, Charles Power, he mentioned that when you watch him up close, you can see all that power in his legs. What I would say to that, and I don't know Charles, and I'm sure he's been covering high school athletes and college athletes for a long time, but is just someone that's played the game naturally, and Charles would probably agree with me on this, naturally without even seeing Bob close. The first thing I can tell you is if you think he's got strong legs right now, just wait. Just wait until he gets into a college weightlifting program, because you can always, our strength and conditioning coach, they used to tell us this all. You could always throw 10 pounds on your legs, especially when you have either baby fat, you're coming out of high school, whatever the case may be, your legs aren't developed. You can throw 10 pounds of muscle. He throws 10 pounds of muscle on those legs. I mean, shoot, this might be a little far-fetched, but I think we could see someone that replicates in the run game from a blocking standpoint, like we saw with Sendarius Hutchinson, a couple of years back, who played for the Buccaneers. He was obviously a tank on the offensive line for USC, and he was one of the strongest offensive linemen, not just strongest offensive lineman, strongest player on USC. I mean, Will Muschamp raved about his strength. Jalen Kilgore. I mean, we talk about guys that might get overlooked a little bit in comparison to some of these other names we got going on here. Kilgore, his sailing, I feel like he's not even close to it. He was, he's someone that worked his way up to that 4-star, Joe, right? And what I really like about this is that South Carolina was the first Power 5 school to make him an offer. And that really meant a lot to him. So when we talk about, right, there's no loyalty in college sports anymore, that's kind of grouping everyone in. Because a guy like Jalen Kilgore, that loyalty, it went a long way. It went a long way in helping USC be able to land him.
Yeah, I think Jalen Kilgore, you're right. I think he's really underrated. I think he's just going to keep growing. 6'2", 195 kind of jumps out at you for a safety that's ideal size, and if not a little bit bigger, you pair him up with Nicky Manwari, you got a pretty deep and big defensive backfield, so that's a good sign. And I mean, kind of jumping ahead a little bit, Bakari Swain, that's another guy, athlete, would be in the defensive backfield if you move him back there. I don't know, Mike, do you know what the plan is for Bakari Swain yet, or do you not?
Well, I think, I know Wes was talking about, like, where do you kind of put him, right? Do you put him on offense? Do you put him on defense? During the summer, Wes reported that Swain appeared to be on South Carolina's board as a defensive back, but he's capable of also playing receiver. And then not too long ago, his high school coach told our own Chris Clark that he believes that Swain's best skill set is at wide receiver, adding that he's a dynamic route runner and just knows how to get open. So I bring those things up because when he has the ball in his hands, right, he's talented, but he understands. I call them landmark routes, right? You can kind of give him an idea of kind of like a vicinity. It's like, all right, this is where I kind of want you to work towards, right? And your landmark route is you're kind of just getting open. Like, what your route is, but it doesn't necessarily have, if it's like a comeback, it doesn't have to necessarily be 12-10. Right? You understand how to read defenses. You understand how a defensive back, when he opens his hip, how things can just change the blanket, just stuff like that. He understands how to read the field very well. Now, granted, speed of the game is going to be faster, of course, playing at the college level in comparison to high school. But if he's able to pick that up, I mean, that'd be great. I mean, usually you see guys like this. And when I say guys like this isn't a shot at them, but usually you see receivers end up on defense, most of the time. So I bring that up just because I could see that being the case here. But again, he definitely is talented. He's talented. He's proven he's talented enough to be able to play wide receiver. Kelton Henderson, Fort Myers kid. He's also going to be playing in the Under Armour All-American game on January 3rd. Wide receiver, fast, runs in the 4.5s. In the 100-meter, he runs a 11.03. He's someone that has the ability to create separation in his routes. Big catch ability. He is someone to certainly keep an eye on. Speaking of guy to keep an eye on, Joe, Zabari Sandy. Zabari Sandy was the very first Gamecock to go public with his commitment on May 8th for USC for the class of 2023. What I like about Sandy is that he is so versatile. And I mentioned Carlins Patel situation a little bit different. That's a guy that was coming in for his 5th year. You have Sandy, who's a freshman. But when you look at how young South Carolina is at that safety position, right? One way that he could earn the opportunity to get on the field a little bit quicker is being able to play nickel. And if you're able to earn Clayton White's trust playing that nickel position, especially as a freshman, right? Even if it's just the number 2, whatever the case may be, right? If you're able to earn his trust, that goes a long way. That goes a long way. And that's not an easy position to play. It's not an easy position. I mean, in my opinion, I think it's one of the toughest positions to play now. I mean, corner was always tough, but nickel, things come at you even quicker. Things come at you even quicker. You also have run gap responsibilities now, gap integrity, that all these things that you're thinking about in terms of like kind of like the, as a safety or an outside linebacker, we would call it the dog, right? That hybrid between a linebacker and a safety. You have to worry about run responsibilities too, at nickel sometimes, just because
100%.
depending on where you are, if you're on the short side of the field, if you're on the boundary side, you might be close to being in the box. I mean, it's just one of those things. And then you could be on the wide side of the field to the field side, right? And then you have all that open space. So I bring that up because it's not an easy position to play. Patel, he never played it before he got to South Carolina, and he was able to pick it up, but he was athletic enough to do that. Sandy is versatile. I think he could be able to pick it up. I really do.
I agree. I think Sandy's a big piece for the secondary too. Another versatile guy, 6'1", 201. It's exactly what you want to see size-wise. Him being the first commitment helps too. He obviously wants to be here, wants to be a part of this program. So, and I think on the nickel position too, I think you're right. I think, things do come at you so fast and you got to absorb it pretty quickly. You got to be football smart as well as freakishly athletic. So it's a big piece for sure.
I'm going to keep trying to go through. We're going to try something, Joe. I don't know if I can give you the ability to take the wheel and then try to do this on my phone so I can shut my laptop. I don't know if that will end the broadcast, though. Will that end the broadcast, Joe?
I do not know.
Let's see. What can we do here? Try to figure that out.
We could just hit on a couple more guys and then call it. I mean, we're getting down to the bare bones of it here.
Right, real quick here. Connor Cox, tight end, coming in. We mentioned this before, even before you had guys entering the portal with Bell and Stogner, right? You need to be able to add depth at that position. You need to be able to add depth. Tight end, South Carolina has had plenty of it. The other thing, though, about Cox that will help him if he wants to be able to see the field a little bit quicker is his ability to block. He, I think he's going to continue to get better as a blocker, but he really enjoyed it, And if he's able to block, what he could remind me of is kind of like a Nick Muse. Nick Muse did a really nice job of blocking, especially his final year before going pro. And, of course, that helped him out a lot with getting drafted and now being a member of the Vikings and playing special teams after getting elevated to the 53-man roster. CJ Adams, wide receiver, 6'3", right? Has the ability to play outside, inside, run motions. I remember the coaching staff actually compared him to Deebo Samuel in terms of how they want to use him. So interested to see how they decide to use him over there. Cameron Sandlin, right? 6'4", 220 pounds. Again, another tight end. This is a guy that played quarterback in high school. And something that really stood out to me, Jody Rote's been trying to recruit this guy since the day he was named the tight ends coach over, almost a year ago, back in February of 2022. But USC's offensive coordinator, Dal Loggins, has been the one who has specifically mentioned to him that they want to try to use him in some type of wildcat package because they want to be able to get him the ball, because they feel like he can make an impact throwing. Jartavius Shivers, 6'7", 290 pounds.
It's a big boy.
That's a big boy, very big boy. And obviously his size is what really stands out to you, but he moved pretty well. You watch his tape, he moves pretty well. And something else that stood out to me too is it looked like his high school had him pull a lot, right? And sometimes those high school those guards, they can't really pull. They can't really pull, they can't really pull. So I bring that up just because he looked comfortable doing it. Has long arms, finishes his blocks. He's a guy that I think Gamecock fans will enjoy watching. Cameron Upshaw, another Florida boy, Perry, Florida, 3-star defensive back. He can make an impact on special teams as well. Has plenty of speed, can also play corner and nickel. Talk about versatility. That will give Clayton White and Torian Gray an opportunity to move him around a little bit. I know we saw this name pop up in the comments section. Judge Collier from Football City, USA, from Rock Hill. And obviously, we know the long list of talented guys, especially Gamecocks, right? Stephon Gilmore, Jadeveon Clowney, Rick Stanford, Torrey Gurley. I mean, that's just a couple that are coming to my head. He can make an impact on special teams. I love the way he attacked kickoffs, right? Just as a gunner, Joe, really stood out to me. But he is someone that, because of that background of playing some receiver, I think he understands route concepts very, very well. And he did a tremendous job of working back into what we call back into phase. So when the ball, when the when the receiver has run past you and you're out of phase, you're not looking back, you're running back. And once you get back in phase, you're leaning on them and you're turning and you're working your way back towards the ball. Does a good job. You don't see a lot of high school players just have that type of technique. That stood out to me a lot, especially as someone that played corner. Tyson Russell, ranked as the 29th top prospect out of Pennsylvania. Again, trying to go up into that area. I know it's the DMV area, and this is Pennsylvania, but still a lot of talented players in that state, in that whole area in general, kind of like that Big Ten area is what I would call it. We have some transfers here. Elksness, right? Nick coming in from Florida. This is a guy that I feel like can be very, very similar to Nick Muse. Very similar to Nick Muse. The quote he had talking about meeting with Pete Lembo, he said, quote, "I'm looking forward to blocking. I'm looking forward to catching touchdowns. I'm really looking forward to getting to South Carolina and doing a lot. I feel there's a lot of opportunities. I'm not afraid to stick my face in there. I've gotten a lot better as a blocker. I don't have a problem sticking my face in there." I mean, that's just, you love hearing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Elskins, he's really, really lengthy. We saw him at practice when it was open to the media. I think he's really, really big. I think he's going to come in, kind of provide that role of blocking tight end, so he's going to be big.
And I apologize if I butcher this. I don't have my pronunciation sheet with me right now. Reed Makishka, I think that's Makishka. Originally was a commit to Clemson, flipped to Miami, and then he flipped to South Carolina. Again, another tight end, another big body tight end. I don't know if, we know we're, pro style offense, but I don't know if USC is planning on doing a lot of 12 personnel. They certainly have the bodies to be able to do it. So again, another big tight end. Something that really stood out to me when he was talking about this, though, is that he started to learn more about South Carolina because of a player that he started watching and trying to model his game after a little bit. And that was a former Gamecock great, Hayden Hurst, who I'll have a chance to see him this week. He's actually, I just remembered that he's playing the Patriots here in Foxborough on Saturday. But, that kind of just stood out to me because, Hayden, shoot, who didn't like what Hayden Hurst did at South Carolina? He could block, he could catch, he could run. He did it all. Elijah Davis, South Carolina kid, went to East Mississippi Community College.
It's you.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's from Wagner. He is the second highest rated JUCO defensive lineman, the highest JUCO defensive lineman and the second highest overall JUCO player.
Yeah. He's a big boy coming from last year.
That is big. That is big.
Yeah, and I agree. I think he's really underrated too, Mike.
6'4", 300 pounds. I'll say this, a lot of these JUCO kids, they get overlooked. I had an opportunity to cover it a lot when I worked in Mississippi. there's some talented players there, man. There's some talented players at those JUCO schools. You know, I mean, some kids, unfortunately, whether it be, grades, whether it be, could be a tough upbringing. Maybe they just didn't apply themselves from a school standpoint. Maybe they didn't have the coach that really pushed them out there to get recruited the same way that, another coach did to help. So I bring these up because, I think there's a stigma sometimes with JUCO kids. And I think that's a shame. But that aside, just strictly talking about ball, I mean, shoot, when I think about JUCO, and I know that some Gamecock fans are probably still upset with him because of comments that were made, but talking football, right? Talking about from an athletic standpoint, Javon Kinlaw was a JUCO kid, and he had a phenomenal career at USC on his way to being drafted in the first round by the 49ers. Alua Tosin Babalade, better known as Big Tree. Big tree. This was big. This was big. He wanted to be able to have more time with his decision. I think what this shows, though, Joe, is, and I think it was actually in the comments section, it was a great point. Beamer stayed at it with the recruiting process, and he respected the wishes of Tree, right? But he still stayed consistent with the recruiting process, and he was able to eventually get him back over. So I just like that. Anyone know why Stogner went back? Yep, want to be closer to his family. Travis mentions, most underrated. Yeah, Judge could certainly be that. Let's do a couple more, then we'll get going here because
you're running on fumes, man. You gotta get some sleep.
Well, I gotta get out of Mr. Kraft's home. We'll try to flip this over, Joe. We'll see if this works. If it doesn't, we'll end the show.
Yeah. The only guy I really wanted to talk about was Zavion Hardy. Kid is a dog. He's a really, 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 really good player. And I mean, we've seen what he can do. I mean, 4-star. He's really underrated. Got a little bit of echo there from Mike. But yeah, Zavion Hardy, that kid is a dog. Like we've seen, like I don't know if anybody saw the basketball highlight, but he just absolutely stuffed some poor kid on his way to the bucket, and we got Mike back. Lovely. But yeah, I don't know, Mike. I don't know if you saw that clip of Zavion Hardy just ruining some poor kid's day that tried to dunk on him. But oh my goodness, he is a freak athlete. I've seen him play before. I mean, he's a monster, absolute monster. Going to be very I think he's one of the more underrated kids in the class. Going to be a big piece for this 2023 class.
I don't know if you heard. Sorry about that. I don't know if you heard. They were actually. I wouldn't say we're getting the boot, but they were confused that we were still here. So we're about to leave right now. We'll walk on out. We'll keep the show rolling. But no, Joe, I did not actually have a chance to see that.
Oh my goodness! I'll send it to you, man. It is unbelievable. Just some kid tried to dunk on him, and Zavion Hardy said no. And I mean, look at his size. Like he's 6'5", 260, and all of it. Like he's a big boy, being able to jump up and deny guys. I'm sure he can. He's got to be able to dunk. I'm waiting for his dunk tape to come out, Mike. Like that kid is athletic, very athletic. I could not be higher on this kid. I mean, I think he's one of the best, grabs in this class. He gets here, puts on a little bit more weight, and going to be a very big steal.
I am leaving Gillette Stadium right now.
Lovely.
I don't think I've ever been here this late.
It is getting late.
But as we continue things, I'm not going to be able to see the comments as much. I'm going to be on the phone here a little bit so we can keep the show going a little bit longer. But, look, I think when you look at those players that they signed today, though, Joe,
yeah,
I think more than anything, I think it should give people a good sense of what they're trying to do, right? I think it's evident, which is they want to get size and speed, right? You look at the guys that they were able to get. We keep saying the trenches, but it's the God's honest truth. The players they were able to get on both sides of the ball, not just on the offensive side, but the defensive side too. And then you look at the tight ends too. My goodness. I mean, you have tight ends that can move, you know? So I think from a recruiting standpoint, the fact that they have taken advantage of the portal as well, they're bringing those type of players in, I think you can expect, expect maybe, that physical style of football a little bit more. I think that's what they want to do. I think they want to just out-physical you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we brought up Cam Stanley. I could see him playing tight end or wide receiver. I've heard they wanted to do both. And you brought up Loggins with that Wildcat formation. I'm really interested to see that. I think it'll be really good. And yeah, I think this class it's got a bunch of physicality in it, a bunch of big, like a lot of size too. It's one thing that kind of stood out to me. You got Monty Q. Rames, he's a big boy. All the linemen are just massive. So I think it's going to be it's a pretty good class. Like, I mean, 17th, I think it's only going to move up regardless of what Nick does. But I think come February, they're going to move up. A lot of teams are going to jump down, I think. But overall, pretty good signing day. And I think the fan base should be really, really happy from what they saw from the Gamecocks today.
Joe, you don't have access to the ads, do you? I mean, I can do the ad read. All right, so I want to apologize to our good buddy Clint Haggard at the Mortgage Network, but today's program is brought to you by the Mortgage Network. Again, as we've always talked to you guys before, it is a crazy time to buy a home right now. Clint can be able to help you out. He helped out former Gamecock quarterback Perry Orth. He can do the same for you. So give Clint a call over at the Mortgage Network. And also today's show is brought to you by Liberty Tax. Tax season, feels like it's always creeping up on us. Intern Joe, one day he's going to be just regular Joe. He's going to be a big boy, and he's going to have to take care of his taxes. Well, the guys over at Liberty Tax can be able to help you out. So give them a call, and they'll be able to help you overcome your taxiety. So again, I want to apologize to both Liberty Tax and Clint as I try to get out of here at Trump Stadium. But we appreciate all the support that they have given Gamecock Central, especially GC Live, all the GC Live shows over the years. So we kind of hit on that, Joe. Is there anything that surprised you maybe this week? Not even just today, but this week with the Gamecocks?
I mean, not necessarily. I think recruiting was kind of all goes. I mean, nothing really surprised me, stuck out to me as much. I guess the whole backlash with the Maryland thing and the Marshawn Lloyd rumors, I think that's a big deal. From what I've heard, that Maryland is just kind of turned him down. But I don't know. I mean, my sources aren't well connected, so I don't want to start any rumors there. But I think the Lloyd saga has certainly been interesting. And I think, like Chris Clark reported, he is not coming back, which a lot of people thought. So I think that was kind of a surprise. Not that he wasn't going to come back, but just what's going to happen to him if he can't go back to Maryland. So I think it's going to be really interesting to watch in the coming weeks. And I know our guy Dylan Stewart, I don't know if he's going to still announce it, but he had tweeted earlier that he has an announcement December 25th. I don't know if it'll be then, but I'm assuming we have an announcement coming. So watch out for that. Dylan Stewart, really, really talented. Going to be a 5-star recruit from the 2024 class. Just kind of keep eyes on him. But, I mean, other than that, like, nothing really, because signing day kind of went as planned. No big flips, no big surprises. Obviously, we're watching for Friday with oh my gosh, Lenorris Sellers, right? I might be sleepy and
you have no excuse. I don't want to hear it. I haven't freaking slept in about 30-something hours.
That's a good point. It's Lenorris Sellers. Sorry, I'm like I'm losing my mind here.
I'll say this. Let's go back to Lloyd real quickly. There's a couple schools I know that he will be talking to or has talked to over the last couple days. I think more than anything, I mean, he wants to be the guy. He wants to be the starting running back wherever he goes. I know there's going to be some people that hear me say that, and they're going to be like, well, that's exactly what he had in South Carolina. He did. And I hope things work out for him. But, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you talk about when you talk about, is the grass greener on the other side? We'll have to wait and see. Put the camera away as we drive, but we'll have to wait and see if the grass is greener for him on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. From the rumors we've been getting, the rumors I've been hearing, I've been told. I wrote up the pre-write in case he did go to Maryland, and I've been told to write it up for some other school. I don't really want to reveal that quite yet, but because I like my source. But it's an interesting one for sure. I think if it does go through, it's going to be really interesting to see the reaction from everybody. I know he's been talking to Georgia. There's another school, but yeah, I think obviously it's a big school, and I think it's going to surprise a lot of people if he does end up going there. And you're right, Mike. I think he wants to go. Obviously, the ideal situation is you go somewhere and start, but I don't see that for Lloyd if he does go to one of these bigger schools. I think he's going to have to fight it out. And also, too, I think if he does get in and kind of get into the reps and rotation a little bit, he's going to be like, if he gets hurt, he's just going to get replaced. These big schools, they have running backs galore, and we've seen that with Georgia. One guy goes down, the next guy steps up, and he's a superstar. So I think that's one big issue with Lloyd is that, like, if he gets hurt at one of these bigger schools, especially in one of his last years, that could be an issue. I think, he goes down, they have next man up, and their next man up is really, really good, probably a 4 or 5 star. So that's one thing Lloyd's got to watch out for wherever he does go, Mike.
No, I think it's a good point. I think it's a good point, Joe. And I think, look, one thing that I've mentioned before in other programs, and we may have even mentioned this throughout the season over on Gamecock Central. When we talk about players entering the transfer portal and we ask ourselves, okay, was this a better situation for them, right? We did a thing, I think it was maybe almost 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago on Gamecock Central. We went back and we broke down how every player who had either entered the portal and attended South Carolina or entered the portal and left South Carolina, how they did this past season. There really wasn't this, guys moving from the SEC to another SEC school and having incredible seasons, right? Now, again, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what success is. I think there's some people that measure it that way because they want to say, okay, this is the SEC. They didn't go to an SEC school. Okay, that's not success. Or they went to an SEC school. How does it measure up against South Carolina? That's not success. I think that's unfair more than anything, but I think it's kind of ridiculous, really. Some players are going to make decisions for other factors, right? Again, we talked about it before. Could be a family-related issue. I mean, whatever the case may be. So I bring that up because when you're strictly talking about the performance of how some of these players do on the field, how it all works out, how it all panned out, yes, we have a small sample size right now, but to me, and it's not even just a South Carolina thing that I want to look at. I want to look at on a larger scale over the next couple of years. I'm interested to see and say, I don't know, 3-4 years, how some of these teams did when you're talking about this is how many players left this school. This is how many players came into the school via the portal, right? So what does that look like? Because 2 schools that come to mind when you think about portal success, obviously one, South Carolina, with what we saw this past season. I mean, that's evident. But number 2, you think what Ole Miss was able to do, right? I mean, Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, especially, the last couple of years, the portal has been his baby.
The portal's been his baby. But is that sustainable? Is that sustainable? And the other thing, too, about the portal that makes things interesting, we talk about recruiting, how, with NIL these days, how you got to learn how to manage egos probably more now than ever, right? As a coach and as student athletes, you got to manage it yourself probably a little bit better. But what does it look like when you go out, right? And you want to take advantage of the portal, okay? Like everyone keeps saying, like, we hear this for basketball, and I don't really want to go down the basketball rabbit hole right now. But it's like, hey, let's go attack the portal. We'll solve our problems with the portal. Okay. Now, again, these are the things that I want to see data in the next couple of years, 3 years from now. Not just for South Carolina, but a lot of schools.
Yeah. I see a comment.
If a coach goes into the portal, Joe, right?
Yeah.
And they have success, what is he going to do? He's going to go back to the portal, especially if he needs to, right? And I know that was a question, where can South Carolina get better at from a portal standpoint? We'll get into that in a second. But if a coach goes back into the portal and has success, they're going to use that as a pitch.
Oh, yeah.
You don't think Beamer said, hey, again, I know we're talking about Patel a lot tonight. Shout out to Carlin's. Proud of Assumption. You don't think Carlin's name got brought up a lot when Beamer talked to other transfers? Again, I know it's not all the same. Like he talks to Spencer Rattler. I mean, that's a different possession. I get that. But you don't think that's an example that he brought up? Hey, look, this kid came from a Division II school. You don't think with Mario freaking Anderson, perfect example, from right down the street at Division II Newberry, you don't think Carlin's name got brought? So I say that because, again, for the short term, South Carolina has had a lot of success with the transfer portal. They have, right?
Absolutely.
I would argue that they would be even worse if they didn't have Rattler this year. I know that they're, but that's a story for another day. I say that though, Joe, because for as much of a selling point as that could be, what if you bring guys in and either they don't produce because they're just not the right fit, right? Or they come in there and they just don't produce. I say that because now, as much as it can be a positive from a recruiting standpoint, it could hurt you on the flip side if guys aren't producing. Because again, how sustainable can the portal be when you're talking about trying to build a winning culture? How much of it can you go out there and get each year without having to worry, hey, is our dynamics changing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point. And obviously it's a big recruiting pitch. I know Beamer was using it. Like, look, we got Spencer Rattler. Like, look, guys want to come here. And the transfer portal is just as much as recruiting, right? Like, guys who have been other places want to come back here. It's not like it's their secondary landing spot. It's like, yo, I like what's going on at your program now versus what is going on at my former program that I'm trying to leave. And that says something about the culture, culture and climate. Shout out Mark Stoops for bringing both of those into the equation for Beamer. But like, it's a big deal. And it's definitely a selling pitch. And I know, so Hunter, if you're still with us, we got your comment. Jalen Harvey is a guy that is out of the mix. The recruiting, or the On3 RPM recruiting prediction machine is saying it's 97% Penn State. South Carolina offered him, and that's a big deal. But I think we're out on Jalen Harvey. I think Dylan Stewart is a bigger target. I think he's somebody you want to watch more. I think Dylan Stewart. Personally, I think Dylan Stewart has potential to be the number one ranked defensive end in his class. That kid is really, 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 really talented. I can't say enough good things about him. Good kid. Interviewed him this summer, I think sometime in August, or July, August, whatever. Dylan Stewart is a really, really good talent, and I think the Gamecocks really want to keep him home. One person that's in particular that's big for him is Sterling Lucas. Sterling Lucas has been on him. Sterling Lucas has been really vocal in his recruitment and played a big role. And I think by Sterling Lucas being a former NFL coach, being with the Ravens, being around really good defensive line talent, I think that really speaks to Dylan Stewart, because he's a guy that has NFL potential. He's one of those guys to be one of the next, great edge rushers that we have at South Carolina. So I think it's going to be a really, really big look. I think, Jalen Harvey is, I think it's either or really. You could have gone either way, but yeah, Hunter, we appreciate that comment. And that's just something I personally, I think, and also too, he's probably looking at Dylan Stewart and thinking, they're going to take the edge there. So, yeah. And also to Mike's point about the selling point about, let's see. Yeah. So when Mike was saying about recruits, yeah, transfer portal is big news. And so as Mike lost connection, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you guys for tuning in. We got an hour and a half going. So great show tonight. I appreciate all the comments, everybody tuning in. Dylan Stewart's a 2024 Hunter. Same one as Jalen Harvey. So I think it could go either way for both guys. Or I think we're more leaning towards Dylan Stewart, and he's kind of the guy that we want. In comparison, I haven't seen any Jalen Harvey's tape, so I'll have to look at that. But just from watching Dylan Stewart, because he was here this summer at some of the recruiting camps, I'm very high on the kid. He's very, 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 very good, and I think he could be really good for the Gamecocks. Just got to put on some weight. But yeah, appreciate all you guys tuning in. Have a safe and happy holidays this weekend, and we will see you next week and after the bowl game with GC Live post-game show. Mike will be on site. I'll be enough back in South Bend. Please spare me in the comments come post-game, but we're going to have some fun. It'll be a good time, and we will see you next Tuesday. Thank you all for tuning in.
And yeah,